What we finished on last class is working on these background colors. All you have to do to set the background color is to, within the void setup function, just type in background, and then you're typing 3 numbers with the values between 0 and 255. So random numbers will change what color that you do choose. And once you run it, you'll see that your background changes to whatever color corresponds with that. So these 3 numbers are RGB values, and let me show you exactly where those get to. So if you go into Tools, and then go into the Color Selector, you'll see a screen that looks sort of like this. All sorts of crazy colors. You can change the base color, change specific colors based on how you see it if you like it. But you'll notice that when you change colors, the numbers on the right side of your screen also change. The ones that we're looking at is going to be RGB. So next to R, G, and B, that's the important numbers to note. So if you find a number that you like, so maybe I like this color of sort of an olive green, what I could do is take the RGB values, so 158, 234, and 147, and replace them in the background. So that's how you specifically change the background color to how you want it to be. So I did a little bit farther here. This is just from my last class, so ignore that for now. This is what you should have, or something like it on your screen. Okay, so any questions on that? Any questions on what we did last class? Anything of the sort? Fairly simple so far, but don't worry, we'll get harder. Okay, so again, I told you about the RGB values. I told you about how the first is red, the second is green, the next is blue. The reason that we use RGB is because science. That's a really great reason, isn't it? But basically, if you take basically with RGB, you can make any color that you can see on your monitor. This is how your monitor creates colors. It's just solid colors with tints of other colors. That's basically what all those numbers stand for. But don't really worry about what that means. Unless you're going into graphic design, it's not terribly important, but it is pretty cool to take a look at. So the next thing we're going to talk about is circles. So you might think that based on what we've done so far, which is using a piece of code which makes a triangle, and a piece of code that makes a line, which were defined by line and triangle, you might think that a circle would be maybe circle, and then all these parameters after it. But that's not quite it. If you try to use circle as one of these keywords, it's not going to work out. What we actually have to use is called ellipse. Anyone ever heard of an ellipse? You take a paper cup and then you sort of squish it so that the rim is no longer perfectly circular. That is an ellipse. So what I want you to do, you should have this in your first project, I want you to add the ellipse and the following 4 numbers. So it's going to be ellipse 250, comma 250, comma 100, comma 100. So let's add that to the code that we've got right now. You only need to do it once. This is just showing a little bit bigger what you're doing. You just need to type it in one time within your void draw loop. So again, all we're doing is taking our first project In the void draw loop, we're just adding ellipse and these 4 numbers after it. I'll tell you what these numbers mean in just a second. And I will keep this up. I won't go to the next slide just so you can see the code that I have so far. Basically, the 4 numbers after ellipse define your ellipse's center point, which in this case is going to be 250, 250, which, if you recall, is the very center of our GUI box. And then you'll notice 100 and 100. That's going to be the diameters of your circle. So the first 100 corresponds to the horizontal direction. What we have right here is a horizontal direction of 100 pixels, so it's going to be 50 from either side of the center. The second 100 refers to the vertical ellipse, or vertical diameter, which again in this case is 100, so it will be 50 pixels up and 50 pixels down to define the sides of your circle. Now, I just sort of spoiled what I was going to ask you, but if these 2 numbers are equal, you're going to be making a circle. Does that make sense? If these numbers are not equal, so say maybe you change this first 100 to 150 and the second one to 100, or second one to 50, your circle is going to elongate horizontally, and vertically it's going to get skinnier. So go ahead and try that. This is what it's going to look sort of like if you just keep the circle as a circle, but see what happens when you change the numbers on of the diameters. So I'll do it with you. So let's already got it up. Change 1 to 150 and 1 to 50, and let's run it and see what happens. Notice that it got longer horizontally and shorter vertically. Okay. Got any questions on that? No? Alright, and stop me if I'm moving too fast to anyone, but yours got larger. It just depends on which numbers that you do change. You know, if you changed 150 down to 50 and 50 up to 150, in fact, let me show you what that does right now. It just depends on what your numbers are. See? So if you made bigger than 100 or 150, you'll have a different size on your screen, obviously. But you did 2 150s, then yeah, you're just going to have a slightly bigger circle if you do both 150s. See? A little bit bigger there. So I feel like that's pretty straightforward. And a little bit about ellipses, don't even worry about this, but it's a type of circle or a conic section. You'll learn that when you get into trig or even calculus when you get older, so no big deal. Just sort of know that that's how you would do it. So I already talked about that, easy enough. So let's go ahead and add a rectangle to our screen. Now rectangle, just like ellipse, isn't what you expect. It's not going to be rectangle, it's going to be rect, which is funny. R-E-C-T. I'm sure that all of you familiar with memes are cracking up over there. But rect is the the keyword to create a rectangle. So just like with ellipse, the first two numbers are going to be the first starting point. It's going to start on the top left corner. In this case, 300, 300 is going to be the coordinate of your top left corner of this rectangle here. So 100, just like with the ellipse, it's going to be your length horizontally, and the 25 is going to be your length vertically, or your width. So keep in mind, first one is length, second one is width. Go ahead and change your ellipse back into a circle by doing 100, 100. And then write down this new piece of code for rectangle. It's going to be contained within the void draw loop. So let me myself type that in. And what that should leave you with is something that looks very similar to this. So the question is, what would happen if we did 4,000 by 4,000 for the rectangle? Good question. Keep in mind, or are you talking about length or width or corner position? Which one of these numbers are you talking about? For the size? Alright, so the question is, instead of the 300, 300, what if we did 4,000, 4,000? That's actually a really good question. Does any of your classmates know the answer before I go over it? What would happen if we change this to 4,000? I'm just going to go to 3,000 because it's going to be the same thing. It's not quite going to error. Well, it might error. I don't actually know. I haven't tried myself. Go ahead and try it. See what happens. Anyone try it? Alright, Wyatt. Go ahead and add ellipse and rectangle in your void draw loop from the, we're working off what we started last class. So if we did put it at 3,000, 3,000, let's run it and see what happens. It vanished. Well, let's think about why it vanished. Remember that these 300s initially are coordinates on this XY axis. So again, here's our X horizontally, here's our Y vertically. The size of our GUI is only 500 by 500 pixels. So we can only see items that are up to coordinate 500, 500. If we set our coordinate to be 3,000, 3,000, our rectangle is going to start way, way, way off the screen. So actually, real quick, I'm going to pause my screen just so that if you're catching up, you can still see it. But in a second, I'm going to show you what happens when I change my rectangle, as well as the background size, since there's only so big my screen can get. I'm going to change the first coordinate of my rectangle to 1,000, 1,000. I'm going to change the size of our GUI to, let's do 1,100, 1,100. And see what happens. So it's not even big enough to show on my screen. So you're just going to have to take, let me change this a little bit more. Let me change it down to 700. Sorry folks, give me 1 second here. I'm just trying to find something that will fit on my screen. Okay, here we go. So real quick, I'm going to go off of what I was showing you. So here's what happens when I start my coordinates at 700, 700, and I made my size 800, 800. So you see, it is still there. Our GUI just was not big enough to actually see it. So real quick, let me change the size back. You're just going to have to trust me that it's still there. Okay? It's still there. Go back to 800. I'll do 850 then. Still there. Okay, so don't fret if you draw something and you can't see it. It just means that your screen size or your GUI size is a little bit too small and you'll want to increase the size of your GUI. Alright? But for now, what I'm going to do is change it back to the regular size we were at, which is 500, 500. I'm going to change my rectangle start coordinate back to 300, 300. So that it looks just like it did on our screen before. So this is what you should have right now. Any questions on that? If you can't see something you draw, just check the start point. Okay, because it does make a difference. So Wyatt, are you good on this? Have you added these two lines to your code? Okay, I was just asking because I knew you came up a little bit late, so. Alright. So I already talked about that. And the next thing we're going to discuss is going to be our fill command. So just like before, we're going to type in what, Josiah, in the brackets? What about it? Because you will be putting it in the brackets, for sure. But the syntax for the fill command is going to be a little bit different than it was for our background command. So when I say fill, we're going to fill the colors that we have on our screen with a certain color. Or, sorry, fill the shapes with a certain color. So it's a little bit different than how we did it before with the background. The background was an RGB, but this time the fill color is going to be in hexadecimal, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So the question is, what would happen if we put it in the brackets? Put what in the brackets? You mean these two parentheses right here? Is that what you're asking? I'm not entirely sure, to be completely honest with you, but I do know that you're not really supposed to mess around with whatever's inside of, or you're not supposed to mess around with these two parentheses. It's just how the compiler understands that you're initiating a function. I'm not entirely sure, to be totally honest with you. You just don't really want to put code in here unless we get to a different point where we do, which I doubt we will. So you're just going to keep keeping them within the curly brackets. So go ahead and type in what you see right here. So just underneath triangle, you're going to type in fill, and then exactly what you see. So the hashtag, and then FAFF08, underneath the ellipse, hashtag 08FF37, underneath the rectangle, hashtag 0D12FC. And I'll show you to change that in just a second too. So these are colors, they're just defined in a different way than RGB. So I'm going to pause for you so you can see it. I'm going to type in myself. I want you to raise your hand once you've entered those in and you can see what happens. Y'all got this? You see sort of what we're going for here? Typing in the hexadecimal colors. Your circle and rectangle are green. That's kind of a good thing, and I'll explain why in a second. Don't worry about them being the same color if something weird happens. I'll show you sort of what's happening here in a second. Because this isn't quite the right code. I'm having you do it though for a reason. Like I said, this is going to behave a little bit differently than you expect. So get ready. Right now we're assuming that this hexadecimal code corresponds to filling the color of our triangle out, which is this blue color. So what I want you to do real quick, I want you to go into Tools and Color Selector, and I want you to type in the hexadecimal code that you see underneath the triangle here. So Color Selector, this hashtag here, let's type in FAFF08. That's yellow. We were assuming that it was going to be blue though, right? Just, if you followed what I did, that's exactly what you'd expect it to be blue. But that hexadecimal code is not for blue. It's actually for the yellow. What this means is you have to use the fill command before you use any of the shape commands. So what I mean by this is what we have is the code is going to be this right here so far. And I'll show you what the real code is in a second. That's actually what I'm doing right now, actually. All we've got to do is on a PC, if you hit Control and then X on your keyboard after highlighting this, or on a Mac if you hit Command and X after highlighting one of the fills, it's going to cut and paste. So to paste, it's Control V for a PC or Command V for a Mac. So we're just going to change the order of the fill and then the shape color for all three of these. Oops. So this is going to be your correct code at this point. So let's run it and see. Now we got the colors that we're looking for. So all I did, this is the old code. Let me find our new code. I just changed the position of fill in triangle. So let me show you what my code looks like. So instead of it going triangle fill, it's fill triangle. It's similarly going to be fill ellipse. It's similarly going to be fill rect. You actually have to define your fill color before you define your shape. So this is going to be what your code should look like right now. I'm going to make it a little bit easier to read, so here you go. I'll give you a second to cut and paste everything before I proceed. You can't read my code? Alright. So, hold that thought right now. Don't need to put code in. Before I do that, what we're going to do first is talk about hexadecimal, and we're going to talk about commenting, and then I'm going to show you the code that I just showed you if you're having trouble reading it. So, the numbers that we put in the parentheses, like I said, are hexadecimal. They come from the color selector. Basically, it's just an easy way for computers to say, alright, this complex set of RGB values needs to be read. To make it easy, we're going to just use hexadecimal. Basic, very, very quick explanation of it. What we're going to want to do is add a couple of comments. So comments are just denoted by these 2 forward slashes. So real quick, I'm going to change back my code to be like it was before. What we're going to do is in between triangle and fill, we're going to comment yellow. Okay, so commenting, just 2 forward slashes. What comments do? They are lines that are meant to be read by the user and not by your computer. So that way, if you write a piece of code and later on you take a look at it, you aren't like, huh, I wonder what this was supposed to do. This is so the human can read, so you know exactly what color we're filling this triangle. So I want you to do the same for ellipse, which is green, and rectangle, which is blue. I'm sorry, I got a little bit ahead of myself there. Just making sure that we're getting the colors that we want, and we're making sure that we know what color we're trying to have. So it's not for computers, commenting is for humans. So here's where we can actually change the fill to be correct. And I'm sorry I jumped the gun a little bit there. What we're going to do is flip around the fill with our code so that we fill in the correct color. And that's where the Control X and the Control V come in. Or if you're on a Mac, a Command X and Command V. We're just going to put our fill above the triangle, above the ellipse, above the rectangle. So I'm going to pause my screen. So I can do it on my own. So this is what you should have just about verbatim in your code. Please raise your hand once you've done this, and once I get a couple of hands raised, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a poll to see how my timing is going today. Alright, so give me just a second. While I have you as a captive audience, I want to let you know that Charlotte Thursday Labs do have a lab tomorrow at 5 p.m. Raleigh Saturday Labs have a lab on Saturday at 11:30 a.m. I do know their Science Olympiad. I'm trying to figure out how we're going to work that with Mr. D if you can't attend it because of Math or Science Olympiad. And the makeup date for the Saturday Charlotte classes is going to be on the 13th. So it's not this coming Saturday, it's the one after that. So your makeup is on for Saturday, Charlotte is February 13th. Note that Charlotte Saturday Labs do have another lab the week after that, which I believe is the 20th. Let me see. Yep. But I will keep you up to date on that. Okay. So real quick, I'm going to do a poll to see if I'm going too fast, too slow, just so I can make sure I'm teaching you as best as I can. I want a couple more votes before I close up the poll. Okay, that should be good. Looks like we're doing good here, and I appreciate you for doing the polls for me, just so I know that we're on the same page here. So any questions on what we just did, which is making sure the fill color is correct and making sure that we're commenting our code correctly? Any questions? Alright. So, like I said, by placing the fill command, you'll see it fills in the shape you want it to. We did the copy paste, yada yada yada. So, I want you now to save your file. It should be your first project again. So let's go ahead and just go to File and Save. And what we'll be doing is opening up a new window so we can start basically fresh. Just by going to File and then New. And so we can't X out of our old one if you've saved it. What we're going to be doing is drawing a face using the couple pieces of code that we have done so far. So it doesn't have to look like this, not by any means. It can look however you want it to. So what we're going to have to do is start from scratch to build our face. So what's the first thing that we have to do in every single time we try to write this code? Can we just start writing rectangle and then start defining coordinates, or do we have to do something first? What do I start this with? very first thing we wrote. Alright, there we go. Void setup. So what we did is we typed in void setup with those two parentheses. We make an open curly bracket and then a closed curly bracket. What's the other thing we have to type in? What's the other function that we're going to start? Give you a hint, it starts with void. Yep, void draw. So just like with void setup, we're going to put two parentheses, next line, open bracket, skip 2 lines, close bracket. So we're going to start all of our code with this. So I'll go back to a bigger copy of it so you can see it better. Hopefully. Let's see. Yeah, right here. This is exactly what we're going to be typing. Just to get started. So what do we have to put into void setup to make our GUI appear? I mean, it's always going to appear, but we have to define something that's very important about our GUI. And that's going to be our size. So let's keep our size at 500, 500 for now. And then end that with a semicolon. So let's see where we're at here. So from here, you'll actually have to figure out the coordinates on your GUI so that you can draw a face using the line tool, the rectangle tool, the triangle tool, and the ellipse tool. So you'll actually have to do some experimentation here. Okay. So what I'm going to do, real quick, I'm going to open back up the first example, the first project that we did, so that you can see all of the different functions we've learned so far. So based on this, I want you to create a face. Again, does not have to look like this. And what you can actually do is send me your code and I can show off your faces to your classmates. I expect your faces to be appropriate. Just throwing that out there. So what I'm going to have you do, code this. I want you to raise your hand when you've done this, and if you do want to, go ahead and send me your code so I can show it off. The hardest part about this is finding your coordinates. I'm going to tell you that now. The question is it 208 or 203? Where are you looking at? Are you looking at which line? Oh, the background? It could be whatever you want, honestly, because that's just going to be a color. So as long as you put numbers, 3 numbers in between 0 and 255, you can choose any color you want for the background. That being said, I have it at 200 right now. But it does not have to be 200. You can do any colors you want. had some pretty cool designs last class. I had a student that actually went and in his free time look up some more code so that he could interact with his GUI. And we will be working with that later, probably next class at this point. And at the end of class, I will show you what he ended up making. It was pretty neat. I was pretty proud of him. It doesn't have to be crazy or anything. I'm really just looking for eyes, a nose, and maybe a mouth. If you're wondering how to make a half circle, that's going to be for another day. There is um, another way to make a half circle. So in fact, while you're doing that, I'll pull it up because it's pretty cool. So real quick, if you want to see the student that did a little bit extra work, let's take a look at his face. He actually did this before class, before I told him we were doing a face exercise, and made it so that when you click it, it gets all scary. Pretty cool stuff. So remember, if you're getting errors, just make sure that you got all your semicolons. Make sure that you are using commas and not periods. Make sure you're spelling things right. Those are the biggest issues I've noticed in terms of why errors are occurring. I am here for questions too, if something's acting funky. It's not time to go, no. I'm having y'all make these faces. Create your faces. And if you have a face that you want to show, all you got to do is copy and paste your code into the questions box, and I will show off whatever you've got going for you. Unless you don't want to show it off. So it's not time to go, literally. Can I make the codes bigger? Yeah, what I'll do actually is show you. Is this better? Yeah, I'm sorry they're really small. Let's see what I can do here. Does that make it a little bit easier? It's got most of it, it's just missing the size and the void setup. Last class I also had somebody make a duck, which is pretty cool. I had a creepy clown. That was pretty fun. Let me, in fact, get everything ready so that I can show off any codes that you might have. So the question is, I'm watching the webinar on a different computer from the one using to make the face. Can you send to on Edmodo? Yeah, you can definitely send me the code. I think it'll work. But go ahead and just type it in and I'll take a look on it. So I'll be eagerly awaiting the code you send me in Edmodo. And yeah. So the question is, how do you get the face? Which face are you referring to? The face that you yourself are going to draw, or the face that you see here? Oh, how do you get the code for it, or how do you make it? All right, the way you do it, all you need to do is copy it entirely. So just doop on your computer. If it's a PC, Control C. If it's on a Mac, Command C, and then paste it into the question box. So the question is the code for the rectangle 0, 0 or a capital D? It's going to be 0, 0. At least in this case it will be. So while you're working, just as a look forward into what we're doing next class, we are going to create movement on your screen cleverly, and we will, I don't know if we're going to be doing text on your screen. So if you gotta go, no worries. If you need to go a little bit early, you can, but I will be here until 7 because we are working on stuff. So go ahead, Sam. It will only let you send it to everyone of or Mr. Dubik. I think you could type it to me, can't you? Or what you could do is one of the posts that's already existing on the Raleigh page, you can put it as a reply to one of those posts. You're still getting the triangle, circle, and rect. I mean, don't stress out about this. This is supposed to be a fun little project, just so you can sort of understand what visually you're doing. So no worries if you're still having some issues figuring all that out. So, all So good night, Wyatt. So what you're going to need to do to get the face, you'll actually have to figure out coordinates that you would like for, this is not the one I was on. Anyways, you're going to need to get coordinates and figure out how to arrange them via coordinates. So for example, if your eyes are going to be two circles, you'll want to figure out where your center point of your circles are going to be. If your nose is going to be, where is it? Oops, I'm in the wrong one, no wonder. If your nose is going to be a rectangle, you'll need to find 3 sets of coordinates that you can make as your endpoints. Similarly, you'll have to determine your endpoint of your upper left corner of your rectangle to define its length and its width. So what you're going to need to do is define, in this case, 2 circles with 2 different, or 2 ellipses with 2 different center points, 3 points for a triangle, and 1 point to start your rectangle. And I can always put up a basic code too, so you sort of see what's going on. So I'm going to get one folk here I can show off. And there we go. Good first base. So that being said, it is 7 o'clock, so if you need to leave, you're more than welcome to leave. I will talk to you all on Monday. And Mateo wants me to tell him that this is his, or tell everyone that this is his face. The code for that is going to be this right here. I'm sorry I can't make it much bigger. Let's see if I can actually. See if that helped at all. Nope. I know you can't see it very well, but I will send it in the reply to the question that you have.